Walter Smith's death leaves a cavernous hole in Scottish football. This is more than just a loss of one of Scottish football's greatest ever managers. More than just a loss of one of the most prominent figures in the storied history of Rangers. Walter Smith was all of that and more, of course. But this is the loss of a statesman too. A man whose wisdom and voice, with no need to be raised for effect, and never a vehicle for hyperbole, demanded attention, and more importantly, respect, across all corners of the game in this fevered, tribal little country and beyond. A man of humor. And warmth. And steel, when required. An assistant to Jim McLean and Sir Alex Ferguson in his younger days, and a talent who more than earned his place beside them, and the likes of Jock Stein, Matt Busby and Bill Shankly in the pantheon of Scottish football men whose characters were every bit as essential to their legend as their achievements. One of the old school. And whose departure leaves a cavernous hole. The record books pay testament to what Smith achieved. A solid, if unspectacular, player with Dundee United and Dumbarton. The closest he got to a medal was when losing to Celtic in the Scottish Cup final of 1974 with the Tannadice side. It was in coaching that he really found his niche. First at United under McLean, and with the Scotland under-18s, whom he led to the 1982 European Youth Championship as Andy Roxburgh's sidekick, before being headhunted by Graham Souness to mastermind a revolution at Ibrox. That is where we first started dealing with each other. And it is where any attempt to put some kind of personal reflection on the personality behind the legend ought to begin. Let it be known that many other journalists were much more friendly with Smith, much closer. There were several occasions during his first stint as manager of Rangers, in particular, in which I fell victim to that infamous, silent glare of his. And let me tell you, it was everything the stories tell you. You'd take your chances staring Medusa in the eye when faced with a choice between her and Walter Smith. There was one particularly memorable night in the cramped old press room of the main stand at Tynecastle. He took offense at a question asked about Peter van Vossen, of all people. The hush fell. Such was the intensity of the frost that I swear the earlobes and tips of the fingers of many of those present started turning black. Such a blessing it was that hearts were most obliging in providing a stiff drink at the time to unfreeze the blood and settle the heart rate after Smith had eventually decided I really wasn't worth the bother. Yet, he was such a helpful, kind man too. In my first proper job in journalism in the late 1980s, aged 16, I used to spend every Tuesday in the main foyer at Ibrox Stadium, sitting around waiting to buttonhole a dressing room full of proper characters such as Ally McCoist, Ian Durrant and Derek Ferguson for an interview. Smith, still Souness's number 2, would come out of the wood-paneled door to the left on my arrival to ask who was required. It was only later in life it became apparent how ridiculous it was that Walter Smith should be running around demanding international players go out and talk to this little naif just out of school in the front lobby. But he did. And the likes of McCoist and Durrant and Ferguson took some hurting. That job also took me all over Europe with Smith and his team after he had taken charge in the wake of Souness's defection to Liverpool. To Elland Road in that incredible Battle of Britain. To Marseille and a seat directly behind Durrant when he fizzed that curling right-footed exocet missile into the bottom corner of Fabian Barthes's net. Smith's reputation as a manager of the very highest level was rubber-stamped during his second spell in charge at Ibrox when he somehow took a Rangers side already in the process of being downsized to domestic titles and the final of the UEFA Cup in 2008. However, it is easy to forget just how close he came to reaching the final of the first ever Champions League too. The loss he suffered to Roma as Tannadice assistant in the semi-final of the European Cup was mired in allegations of bribery. He knew what would eventually come out with regard to Marseille and their controversial owner Bernard Tapie over the course of time as well. Smith didn't use excuses, though. He faced things square on. A Carmyle boy, an apprentice electrician, he represented so much of what was, and is, good about Scottish working-class culture. Hard, but fair. And possessing an honesty that crossed barriers. Carrying the coffin of Tommy Burns along with McCoist at the funeral of Celtic's favourite son in May 2008, after bringing him onto the staff during an impressive spell as Scotland boss, was visual evidence of that. Yet, there was one afternoon inside the walls of Murray Park 3 years later in which he showed so much of what he was about. In which his very presence, its weight and the electricity it generated, hung in the air. Rangers were being investigated, not for the first time, for sectarian singing by their supporters. This time, in a game against PSV Eindhoven. Smith was always good for switching the tapes off and talking at length about sensitive issues off the record. Filling in the blanks for reporters when he didn't quite want his fingerprints on the evidence. Not this particular afternoon. Smith dropped the bombshell admission he once used to sing all those same songs himself. With some vigor. He knew about all the traditions of the club, but had to make it clear some of them could no longer be translated to the modern era. He warned of drastic consequences if such behavior continued. Implored fans to stop. He spoke in quiet, measured tones for some time, but his words shook the room like an earthquake. This was the address of a wartime leader, rather than the usual platitudes of the football manager, but Smith had the natural wit and intelligence to find the right tone, pick the right words. To leave an impression, and let it be known what he expected. For all he spent many hours giving little away in media briefings, you knew instinctively when he entered the room and had something specific to say. 10 titles over 2 spells, including the completion of 9 in a row in 1997, 5 Scottish Cups and 6 League Cups explain the endless love that will exist within Rangers for Smith and within the hearts of all those legendary players who served under him. Unlike a Ferguson or a McLean, perhaps, there are few former Charges who have anything than warm words for their old boss. Yet, Smith's love for that club was unconditional too. He never hid the fact he was a Rangers man. It was surely part of the reason he was always regarded kindly by a large percentage of supporters from rival clubs including Celtic. He was a football man too. And a man's man. Unyielding yet generous. As serious in his work or in negotiating the peculiar politics of his trade as he was avuncular over a drink or dinner. Straight. Loyal. Tough. No nonsense. Decent. These are the traits and qualities you hope for in all great men. And Smith was undoubtedly one of those.